Welcome to my recap of the first 3 seasons of Castlevania. If you need a refresher on a particular episode, use the chapter markers in the description. Otherwise, pour yourself a fresh glass of virgin blood and enjoy the recap. In Wallachia, 1455, a woman crosses a field of impaled skeletons and cuts her way through a horde of bats to reach a large castle. She knocks on the front door, and it slowly opens. Inside, she finds Vlad Dracula Tepish and introduces herself as Lisa from the village of Lupu. "I want to be a doctor," she says. Dracula assumes her to be a superstitious witch. However, Lisa insists, "I believe in science, but I need to know more. I've exhausted my other options, and all the stories say the man who lives here has secret knowledge." He tests her further, baring his fangs, but Lisa remains steadfast and proves to be a genuine knowledge seeker. "You are definitely different to most humans I have met in recent times," Dracula says, softening his tone. "Maybe I can teach you to like people again," Lisa offers, "or at least tolerate them, or stop putting them on sticks." Dracula chuckles, adding, "I gave that up a long time ago." He walks off and Lisa follows as Dracula asks, "Where is Lupu Village?" "You don't travel much," Lisa comments. "I can travel," he responds. "This entire structure is a traveling machine." "But you don't," Lisa says. "Maybe you should. The world is changing. Travel like people do. You might like it." They reach their destination and Lisa is awed by Dracula's laboratory. Speaking of the people Dracula has such a distaste for, and all Lisa can learn from Dracula, she says, "They won't live such short, scared lives if they have real medicine. They won't be superstitious if they learn how the world really works." Dracula asks why he should bother helping them and why he should teach her. "To make the world better," Lisa responds. "Start with me, and I'll start with you." Vlad Dracula Tepish bows, smiles, and welcomes Lisa to his laboratory, saying, "I think I might like you." 20 years later, in 1475, by orders of the bishop, Lisa Tepish is tied to a stake and set aflame. As the fires grow closer, she looks up with tear-soaked eyes and begs, "Don't hurt them! They don't understand!" Gasping and coughing, she tries to reach out one more time. "I know it's not your fault, but if you can hear me, they don't know what they're doing. Be better than them, please." Elsewhere, Lisa's husband, Dracula, returns from traveling abroad and finds their cottage in ruins. He learns of Lisa's fate from one of her patients, Mrs. Juvara. With his back to the woman, Dracula looks at his pale hands and recalls aloud, "She said to me, if you would love me as a man, then live as a man. Travel as a man. No more," he says, then turns to Lisa's friend. "I do this last kindness in her name. She who loved you humans and cared for your ills. Take your family and leave Wallachia tonight. Pack and go, and do not look back." Tears of blood flow from Dracula's glowing red eyes. His wife, now little more than charred bones, crumbles to ash as the villagers applaud. Suddenly the flames explode and form the shape of Dracula's face. "What have you done?" he roars through the fire. She's a witch," the bishop says. "Lisa Tepish was a woman of science, and the one thing that justified humanity's stench upon this planet." When the bishop insists Dracula is not real, the flames grow further. "You take my wife and deny I even exist. I give you 1 year, Wallachians." Dracula warns they have 1 year to leave the village before he returns to destroy them. At his castle, Dracula prepares to spend a year summoning armies from hell. He is interrupted by a figure behind him, begging him to reconsider. The younger man tells Dracula to focus his revenge on only those responsible, rather than kill thousands of innocent people. "There are no innocents! Not anymore! Any one of them could have stood up and said, 'No, we won't behave like animals anymore,'" Dracula shouts. "I grieve with you," the man says, "but I won't let you commit genocide." Dracula attacks before the man can draw his sword. 1 year later, in the city of Targovishte, having ignored Dracula's warning, the people of Wallachia gather for an address from the archbishop. He celebrates the anniversary of the burning of the witch, and calls the devil a liar for his threats, as it's been a year and nothing has happened. His speech is interrupted as the clouds darken. The villagers scream as blood and the corpses of unborn demonic offspring rain upon them. Dracula's fiery visage appears again and sentences them all to death. His castle rises in the distance as he unleashes hordes of hellspawn that indiscriminately and violently kill. The streets of Targovishta are grotesquely decorated with the dismembered remnants of the men, women, and children who lived there. And over the demonic screeches of his army, Dracula's orders can be heard. Kill them all, and once Targovishta has been made into a graveyard for my love, go forth into the country. Kill for my love. Kill for the one true love I ever knew. Kill for the endless lifetime of hate before me. In a small town at the outskirts of Gresit, a man named Peter runs into a tavern, warning of the approaching horde. Another patron, a farmer named Bosha, blames Dracula's attack on the old families and great houses, especially the worst of them, the Belmonts. We should have killed all the Belmonts, he says. At the mention of the Belmonts, a nearby patron mutters to himself, shit, and attempts to hide his face. Bosha continues ranting about ordinary people getting caught up in the conflicts between the old families, while the stranger keeps to himself, until he runs out of ale. At the bar, Bosha recognizes the Belmont family crest on the stranger's shirt. The stranger feigns ignorance, while Bosha and the others insist the stranger is a Belmont and is to blame for their troubles. Everyone knows the Belmonts dealt in black magic, Bosha says. The Belmonts dealt with monsters. The Belmonts fought monsters, son. Momentarily forgetting his anonymity, the stranger adds, so I'm told. The Belmonts were excommunicated by the church, Bosha continues. Banished, disowned, their lands taken because they were evil. And now Dracula's hordes are abroad in the land. And whose fault is that? As the tensions boil, the stranger tries to leave, but instead, Bosha attacks. He demands a confession, but the man refuses, until a kick below the belt convinces him otherwise.
Oh, Trevor Belmont. House Belmont. Lost son of the Belmont family. Happy now.
Bosha goes for another attack, but this time Trevor defends himself. In the midst of a drunken fight after taking a few punches, Trevor threatens, that's how you want it. Listen, I used to fight fucking vampires. After leaving the tavern relatively unscathed, Trevor finds a tall tree to sleep under. The next morning, he visits the town of Gresit in search of breakfast. Inside, he finds piles of bodies and townsfolk cleaning up blood and entrails. In speaking to the locals, he learns that they are under siege from Dracula's monsters who visit them nightly. One local explains that they have no defenses, but don't need them. There are a tribe of speakers in their city. Once the church gets rid of them, the demons will leave them alone. He also hears an old story of the sleeping soldier. They say he was a great hero hundreds of years ago, but now he sleeps under the catacombs to wait until he's needed again. The local asks Trevor to keep it quiet, as the new bishop hates the old wisdom and has no tolerance for such blasphemy. At night, the villagers must be careful of Dracula's monsters, but during the day, they must be careful of the bishop's men. True to the locals' word, Trevor happens across two of the bishop's men harassing an elderly speaker. Trevor tells himself to keep walking, but when the men move to attack the older man, Trevor can't hold back. He whips one of the men's hands, disarming him of his weapon and one of his fingers. When the men still do not retreat, Trevor throws his whip again, and the other man loses an eye. Finally, they leave. Trevor accompanies the elder to his lodging and meets the rest of the speakers. There, Trevor learns that although the townsfolk blame the speakers for Dracula's wrath, it is truly the church's fault for burning Dracula's wife at the stake. The elder explains that there are no doctors or aid left in Gresit, so the speakers must remain and help. Further, a savior sleeps under Gresit, a great hero who sleeps until he is needed. Oh, I've heard that one, Trevor says. The sleeping soldier. The elder asks how much Trevor knows about all this. I'm a Belmont, Trevor says. So I know you're a nomadic people who gather knowledge, memorize it, carry complete spoken histories with you. I also know you gather hidden knowledge, and have practitioners of magic in your tribes. The elder reveals that one of their tribe went looking for the sleeping soldier in the catacombs, and has not returned. The speakers will continue searching for them. The elder asks what Trevor will do. Trevor callously explains that he'll watch all the good little people die, then leave. You feel no compassion? The elder asks. This is what the church wanted, Trevor says. My family were the only people who could have fought Dracula and his army, but they didn't want us. They wanted to fight the darkness on their own terms. Good luck to them. The elder continues. But the ordinary people of Wallachia, they didn't get the choice. For evil bastards to win power, Trevor says, all ordinary people have to do is stand aside and keep quiet. There's always a choice. Then Trevor insists the speakers leave and escape death, but the elder refuses. A younger member of the tribe shouts that the missing member is the elder's grandchild. We can't even bury them, he says. It's not our way to just leave our dead unattended to. Frustrated, Trevor offers to recover the elder's grandchild's body so the speakers can leave. When the young speaker asks why, Trevor explains, they're going to come for you soon, the good people. It's going to be a pogrom. I don't think you answered my question, the speaker says. Trevor explains, I know what it's like to be persecuted by your own country for the accident of your birth. If I find your grandchild, will you leave this city before nightfall? The elder agrees. Trevor cracks his knuckles and moves to leave, first warning the speakers to stay put and not roam the town. Before Trevor exits, the elder says, Belmont, it is not dying that frightens us. It's living without ever having done our best.
I don't care,
Trevor says, then leaves. In the catacombs, Trevor finds a statue of a robed figure. Trevor thinks out loud, either someone left a statue of a speaker down here, or he's interrupted by a cyclops. Using the statue as a stepping stone, along with his blade and whip, Trevor dispatches the beast. Suddenly, the statue turns back into a living girl, the elder's granddaughter. After vomiting, she asks what happened. Trevor answers, you walked into a cyclops. Turns you into stone with his eyeball, and feeds on your terror while you're trapped in your own body.
Did you climb on me?
She asks. A bit, Trevor replies. That was rude, she exclaims. When Trevor explains he's there to retrieve her so the speakers leave for safety, she insists they find the sleeping soldier first. Trevor callously insists there is no sleeping soldier and points out that the elder thinks she's dead. The least she can do is return to put his mind at ease. He adds, let's show you to your grandfather and then you can come down here and get killed again. Deal? Very well, she says. Then introduces herself. I'm Saifa Belnares. I don't care, Trevor replies. At their lodging, the elder thanks Trevor for returning his granddaughter. She apologizes for not finding the soldier, when Trevor again insists it's just a booby-trapped legend. He explains that in the catacombs, they saw metal veins pumping hot liquid, and torches that light by themselves. These exactly fit descriptions written by his great-grandfather, descriptions of the inside of Dracula's castle. Trevor promises to come back later and adds, see if you can find some beer. Once he's out of sight, Saifa suggests to her grandfather that she can pee in a bucket and tell him it's beer. Outside, Trevor is accosted by men of the church and forced to see the bishop, who offers him a deal. Leave town and we won't kill you. Despite the crimes you've committed against my aides, despite the crimes your family has committed against God, the bishop says, you will walk safely until sundown.
My family committed no crime,
Belmont says. You people simply decided we were wrong to defend this land against the supernatural. And now, the bishop angrily interrupts. You Belmonts have never understood the power of the word of God. The people of this city are mine and our lord's now, and they'll do as I ask in his name. By morning, no speaker will defile these streets, and you will either be gone or dead. Do you understand? The bishop adds that they can discuss Trevor's excommunication from the church later. As he leaves, Trevor points out that the excommunication came from a little higher up on the ladder. The other great cities are lost or losing, the bishop points out. Gresit will be the last major city in Wallachia. To all intents and purposes,
I will be the church.
Trevor returns to the speakers and informs them the bishop is beyond insane. If the speakers don't leave by sundown, they will all be killed. They refuse to leave. The elder appeals to Trevor's experience as a Belmont, asking if he'll continue to run just because the church and society have cast his family aside. The elder explains that they are fighting a bigger war for the soul of our people, he says. Because if we truly are the sort of people who will kill one another at the behest of a madman's fantasies, then perhaps it is right and proper that things from hell should rise up to wipe us out. Sypha adds, "It's time for those of us who fight that war to stand up and be responsible, Trevor Belmont. You should leave now." Trevor refuses. Instead, he grabs his sword and insists, "No, you're leaving right now." Later that night, the citizens of Gresit tear down the entrance to the speaker's hideout. But inside, they and the bishop's men do not find any speakers. Instead, they find a Belmont. Meanwhile, the speakers hide safely in the now Cyclops-free catacombs. The bishop's men ask Trevor what he hopes to achieve, dying here for nothing and for people he doesn't know. "My family," Trevor says, "the family you demonized and excommunicated, has fought and died through generations for this country. We do this thing for Wallachia and her people. We don't have to know you all, we do it anyway. And it's not the dying that frightens us. It's never having stood up and fought for you." Trevor sheds his coat and proudly displays his family crest, adding,
I am Trevor Belmont, of the House of Belmont, and dying has never frightened me.
The men draw their weapons, but Trevor is faster. He throws 2 fistfuls of blades, cutting into all but one of them, who he instead tackles through the entryway. On his way out, Trevor pulls a rope to drop loose stones, trapping the rest of his pursuers inside. With the help of a large wooden cross and a stolen axe, Trevor disperses the crowd of angry villagers waiting for him outside. Then, with the crowd distracted, he runs through the back alleys of Gresit, killing many of the bishop's followers on his way. And while Trevor eludes his pursuers, Dracula's minions fly above Gresit and prepare to attack. At the church, the bishop is visited by demons. With shaking hands, he professes that God loves him, but the monsters correct him. It is the bishop's fault they are here. God does not love him. "She was a witch," the bishop pleads. The demon scoffs at his lies, but comforts the bishop. "We love you," the demon says. "We couldn't be here without you." The demon's large hands wrap around the bishop, and it continues. "Let me kiss you." The bishop drops his cross necklace, and moments later, it is joined by a pool of his own blood. Cornered by the angry villagers, Trevor is rescued by a wall of flame around him. He looks up to see it as Sypha's doing. As he walks down the newly formed path, he shouts to her, "You never told me you were a magician." "You never asked," she answers. "What are you doing here?" Trevor asks. "I didn't ask you to fight for me," she responds. "I fight for myself." "Fine," Trevor says. Then notices the knife-wielding priest he stopped from attacking the elder that morning. Trevor makes the truth known that the speakers are in Gresit to help, and it is the church's fault the demons have come. This quickly turns the villagers against the bishop's man, and they swiftly execute him. Then Dracula's horde arrives. Belmont instructs the villagers as though leading them to battle. He finds a priest to create holy water. Those with pikes or long weapons move to the front line. All swords are wiped in salt, and Sypha creates walls of ice, which is dangerous to the demons, forcing them to attack in a straight line toward them. Following Belmont's orders, the villagers triumph over the Hellspawn. But after the battle, the ground crumbles under Trevor and Sypha. They fall and land further into the catacombs than they'd previously visited. Making their way through, they find a decorated tomb. Trevor's foot lands on a hidden switch, which causes the coffin to slowly open. A man with long blonde hair floats out of the coffin. "Why are you here?" he asks. Sypha explains the story of the sleeping soldier, while Trevor explains, "I fell down a hole." Sypha tells the man of Dracula's hordes, seeking to commit genocide on humanity, but the man remains focused on Belmont, asking if that's what he believes. "You're asking if I believe you're some sleeping messiah who will save us?" Trevor responds. "No, I don't. I know what you are." Sypha gasps at the realization that the man floating before them is a vampire. The vampire asks Trevor if, as a Belmont, he cares about what Dracula is doing. "Honestly, I didn't, no," Trevor answers. "But now, yes, it's time to stop it." Sypha smiles. Then the vampire asks if Belmont thinks he can stop it. "What I think is I'm going to have to kill you." Sypha shouts, "Belmont, no! He's the one we've been waiting for." Belmont disagrees and points out how well-kept, functional, and fortified with traps the catacombs are. He gets the vampire to admit he's only been down there a year. He is not some messiah that's been waiting for centuries. Trevor berates the vampire until the floating Jesus, as Belmont calls him, retrieves his sword, but is quickly struck by Trevor's whip. The two fight until they finally reach a stalemate. Then Sypha appears behind the vampire, threatening to incinerate him before the two men can kill each other. "You're a speaker magician," the vampire notes. "Yes," Sypha responds, "and his goal is mine, to stand up for the people." "Good," the vampire responds. "Very good. A vampire hunter and a magician. You'll do." He heals his wounds and stands. In a friendlier tone, he announces, "I am Adrian Tepish, known to the Wallachians as Alucard, son of Vlad Dracula Tepish. I've been asleep here in my private keep under Gresit for a year, to heal the wounds dealt by my father when I attempted to stop him unleashing his demon armies." Sypha extinguishes the magic flame in her hand and says, "You are the sleeping soldier." "I'm aware of the stories," Alucard responds. "I'm also aware that the speakers consider the story to be information from the future." And Alucard continues with the rest of the story. The sleeping soldier will be met by a hunter and a scholar. "So what happens now?" Sypha asks. Alucard dresses, grabs his sword, and answers, "I need a hunter and a scholar. I need to save Wallachia, perhaps the world, and defeat my father." Belmont asks why, and Alucard responds, "Because it is what my mother would have wanted." As Belmont grabs his whip, Alucard adds, "And we are all, in the end, slaves to our family's wishes." Then the three of them leave on their journey to destroy Dracula. At Dracula's castle, Vlad addresses the leaders of his army, telling them their strategy is working and they will continue to use the night hordes. At the end of his speech, Dracula asks Hector and Isaac, the only two humans in the room, to present him with plans for their next steps. The leaders of Dracula's army, all vampires, are put off by his reliance on humans above them. Godbrand, a brash ex-Viking, shouts at Dracula, demanding to know why. Vlad calmly replies, "The only two generals in my court who are not driven by thirst, the only two who are bound by loyalty and intellect. True, they are not vampires like you and I, Godbrand, and that is why I trust them, for we are about the business of wiping humanity from the earth, and they still stand with me." In Dracula's study, Hector and Isaac ask the same question, why them? Dracula explains that vampires view humans as livestock, and can no longer conceive of them as thinking beings. "But you two are different," he says. "You are human. You are not looking at the scouring of humanity from the earth as an opportunity to get livestock under control and to fill stables and abattoirs and pantries. You hate your species. You hate humans. You have a focus and clarity that the others lack. You understand that humans think and scheme and betray. You understand why they all must die." Hector thanks Dracula for the clarity and says that he just hopes the generals will listen to them. "They will have no choice," Dracula reassures. "They obey me. You are my chosen authors of the war, and so they will obey you." After their discussion, Hector stares in the flames of Dracula's fireplace. He recalls verbal abuse from his parents, sickened with him and his necromancy, and he recalls their screams as he burned them alive. Isaac puts a hand on Dracula's shoulder and assures, "It's going to be all right. We're going to kill them all for you. They will suffer." "The suffering doesn't really matter to me anymore, Isaac," Dracula responds. Only the death matters now." In Gresit, Sypha waves goodbye to her people, who are leaving to help other villages. When Trevor notices Sypha's sadness and fear of being alone, he says nothing. "This is where you're supposed to tell me that I'm not alone, Belmont. You are really not very good at this," Sypha chides him. "I learned to travel alone early in life. Maybe I just got too used to it," Trevor says. Then he tries again. "Okay, look, I know a little bit about what you're feeling. I'm sorry, but we have a thing to do now. All I can do is try and make sure it doesn't get you killed so you can see your family again." "That's your encouraging talk?" Sypha replies. Trevor offers, "Or you can get killed and they get eaten in the forest, so none of you have to be sad. How's that?" In the speaker's abandoned hideout, Alucard draws a picture of his parents. A tear falls on the image of his mother as he announces he will no longer go by Adrian Tepish, but instead Alucard of Wallachia, the name of his mother's people. At Dracula's castle in his forge, Hector plays with his resurrected puppy, Caesar. Godbrand arrives to apologize for his earlier outburst, but quickly follows up by voicing concerns from him and the other generals. They worry the war is too chaotic and undirected. "It could be done more carefully," Godbrand says. "Oh," Hector replies, "there is more wanton bloodshed than I would like. I don't love the rest of humanity. I don't want to share a world with them, but the suffering." They're interrupted when two robed figures arrive with a wagon full of corpses collected from Gresit. Hector gets to work reanimating the dead humans into night creatures for Dracula's army. As he does, Godbrand comments, "Ah, the Devil Forge Master at work again, raising the dead." They pause as they can feel the castle moving again. In the castle's control room, Dracula waves his hand in front of a floating device, activating the teleportation and bringing them to an isolated valley. As Belmont argues with Sypha that he does know how to be nice, they approach Alucard. He apprises Sypha of Dracula's ability to transport his castle. As they wonder how they can trap the castle, Belmont suggests they find his family's old home. It's been long destroyed by angry villagers, but underneath it, there is the Belmont Hold, filled with knowledge that may guide their quest to kill Dracula. Trevor would not know how to use the magic there, but Sypha and Alucard would. Alucard comments that it's a good thing he didn't kill and eat Belmont earlier. Belmont echoes the sentiment, saying it's a good thing he decided not to flay Alucard and turn him into shoes.
Such a merry band we are.
Sypha says before finding them a wagon and horses. Once she returns, they set off. At Dracula's castle, his war council is quieted by the arrival of a woman with long white hair and a dark red dress. "I am Carmilla," she says. "I am come from far Styria to join the war council." Dracula comments that her presence was requested some time ago. She replies that his moving castle is hard to find, and with such mighty vampire generals, what use could he have with a mere regional ruler? She continues, "And yet, my lord, your forces were repelled from a single city-state. Your generals are in disarray, so I feel that, perhaps, it is time to offer my insights to your great cause." "And what insights have you, Carmilla?" Dracula asks. "Why was this new wife of yours never turned?" she asks. The room fills with tension. Dracula's eyes turn red. She presses further, asking if this wife was simply a human pet. And if so, she says, why is vampire society going to war with the world over it? Dracula demands to speak with her alone, and they continue their discussion privately. She explains that her display was meant to unsettle the room, giving her as much advantage as possible. When he demands to know why she asked him about his dead wife in front of everyone, she explains that it's a question Dracula's generals have been asking themselves. She just gave him an opportunity to address it. After their talk, Carmilla quietly scoffs behind Dracula's back before leaving. Elsewhere, over campfire, Sypha asks Alucard why he isn't killed by sunlight. He explains that it's because he's half human. He goes on to share the story of how his human mother met Dracula and demanded he teach her to be a doctor. When Belmont sarcastically comments on the notion, Alucard makes it clear that Dracula does hold centuries of knowledge, long forgotten by humanity. He could have changed the world. "I think he might have," Alucard says, "if Mother hadn't died." Then he describes the world Dracula will create after destroying the humans. In books bound by skin of the people he hates most, Dracula wrote about flying machines that would pull shrouds across the sky, creating permanent darkness where hordes of the night will rule. They're interrupted by the sound of nearby creatures. The three prepare for a fight, and with Alucard's sword, Belmont's whip, and Sypha's magic, they quickly dispatch the monsters, though one wounded creature escapes and flies off. In Dracula's castle, Isaac self-flagellates and recalls his childhood, being whipped by his master as punishment for snooping through the man's books. His master demands to know why he was going through his things, and a tear-soaked Isaac explains that he just wanted to learn, so he could help his master, because he loves him. The man continues to whip Isaac, demanding he never use the word love again. Finally, Isaac leaps at his master, plunging his thumbs into the man's eyes, brutally killing him. His recollections are interrupted by Godbrand, bringing a wounded creature from a party sent to Argesh. Unbeknownst to them, this creature was wounded by the fight with Alucard, Sypha, and Belmont. It tried flying back to the castle, but died 20 yards out from its destination. As Isaac cuts the creature open, he espouses his hopes. Dracula will bring a pure world into being. I believe that. I believe him. I want, of all things, a pure world. a clean world where there is only loyalty and only love. He touches his magic-imbued dagger to the monster, bringing it to life, then returns to Dracula and the War Council, where there is much disagreement. Hector and Carmilla believe that taking Argesh serves no strategic purpose. Instead, they should target Betrayal, which, as the region's biggest river port town, would cut off any escape from Wallachia. Isaac believes that they should stay the course and remain focused on Argesh. As an old, respected town, taking it would give them power. Dracula shouts, "Enough!" and stops the arguing. Carmilla quietly asks Hector if he thinks it's enough. Isaac reveals that he revived the creature from Argesh. It was wounded by unknown assailants. However, Argesh is close to Gresit, where Alucard is known to sleep, and there was recently a Belmont there. They believe the two are working together. Learning that the Belmonts are not extinct, Carmilla hurriedly insists they observe the ancestral Belmont home. When Godbrand asks why, she angrily and condescendingly explains that the knowledge used to hunt vampires for centuries may be stored there, and a living Belmont will likely seek it. She turns to Dracula and says, "This is your war council, my lord?" Then smirks to herself. A young Hector cries over the corpse of a dog. He strikes 2 coins together again and again until the creature returns to life. Decades later, the Devil Forge Master strikes a hammer over a human corpse, imbuing it with life as demon spawn for Dracula's army. Carmilla joins him in the forge and compliments his skills in forgery, something vampires have not been able to do themselves. Then she comments that Hector seems worried about Dracula. And he is. It's not like Dracula to be indecisive. And further, he seems to be the embers of a man, as though his fire has gone out. "There are things we can do that don't require his decisions," Carmilla says. Hector is doubtful, but Carmilla suggests they can send a small group to the Belmont home. It would not harm the war effort. Hector questions why it's so important to her, and she re-emphasizes the importance of making sure the tools and knowledge there do not fall into the wrong hands. Hector agrees with the logic, but still insists upon Dracula's approval. Carmilla asks how Hector ended up working for Dracula. He explains they met while Vlad was traveling. Dracula heard of Hector from some scholars and sought him out. Then, after the death of his wife, Dracula returned and asked for help in culling the humans that Hector had isolated himself from. Hector agreed to help on the condition that they stop short of genocide. Hector did not want humanity to suffer or go extinct, just unable to cause further harm. He suggested they be kept mercifully as livestock. Dracula agreed. Carmilla confirms that when Hector forges creatures, they are loyal to him. Then she asks him to make some troops and help her convince Dracula to attack Betrayal, the riverport town. Meanwhile, on horse and wagon, the trio near the Belmont home. Sypha sees another side of Trevor as he points out a tree he played on as a child. "It's hard to imagine you playing," she remarks. They arrive at the dead home and search for passage to the underground. Sypha thinks it must have been nice growing up in one place. It was, Belmont searches for the right word, it was fine. Alucard asks how old he was when his family home was taken. 13, 14, something like that, Trevor answers. "You've been on your own since you were 13? Sypha asks. When Belmont asks why all the questions, Alucard remarks, "I'm disturbed to find that I had more of a childhood than you did, and your dad's fucking Dracula," Belmont says. Then the three share a laugh. They find the entrance and attempt to lift the stone blocking it. However, it is magically sealed, and Trevor's family was taken before they could teach him how to open it. Looking over the inscriptions, Sypha speaks an incantation in the old occult language of Enochian, and the door opens. Alucard is impressed, and Sypha proudly tells him she knows the ancient language. Then Alucard pokes fun at the Belmonts for dealing in such occult magic. "I didn't know it was a fucking magic door," Belmont says. "Doesn't make us black magicians." As they walk down the spiral staircase, Sypha comments that Belmont is not a Wallachian name. Trevor explains that they came from France. The dark things moved east, so they followed. At the bottom of the stairs, they find a door, and through it, an extravagant library of books and artifacts collected through the generations of Belmonts. "My God," Sypha says, while Trevor enjoys a moment that is the closest he'll come to a family reunion.
The memory of my family. All that's left of us.
They head to the lectern in the center of the room, which indexes everything there. Then a treasure chest catches Trevor's eye. Bloody hell, is that what I think it is? Sypha laughs. Careful, Trevor, you almost sounded excited about something. He opens the chest. Beautiful, Trevor says. What on earth is that ugly thing? Sypha asks. He lifts the chain link whip and admires it, answering, I don't believe they hit it. It's the morning star. Looking back to the index, Sypha is amazed and is surprised to find that Alucard is not. It's like a museum dedicated to the extermination of my people, he explains. At Dracula's castle, Godbrand approaches Dracula and peppers him with questions, wondering what they'll eat if all humans are eradicated. Dracula assures him he will be fine and warns him to tread carefully. Godbrand ignores the advice and continues to press for more specific answers. Dracula towers over him menacingly, saying, I will not be questioned by you. I have told you how it will be. The humans will die. You will be taken care of, little Godbrand. Little vampire, little parasite, little boat weevil who delights in making noise and pretending he is important and dangerous. Are you going to continue questioning me? Are you going to fight me, little Godbrand? With a sweaty brow, Godbrand looks away and quietly answers, no. Dracula threatens to eat his heart, and Godbrand leaves. Then Dracula sits, exhausted. In the halls, Godbrand runs into Carmilla. She asks how Dracula is doing, and Godbrand exclaims that Dracula will kill all the humans, leaving them with no livestock. Further, he suspects Dracula has not fed in some time. Godbrand believes that Dracula is not fighting a war, but committing suicide. His wife's dead, Godbrand says, and he wants to join her, and he wants to take all of us with him. He storms off, but Carmilla asks him to wait. When he refuses, she kicks him down a flight of stairs. With his attention refocused, she reminds him that Dracula needs to go to Betrayal. She tells Godbrand the story of the man who turned her into a vampire, a man who promised her the world, then grew old, cruel, and mad. Carmilla killed and left him. Now she finds that Dracula too is becoming an old, cruel man. Never again, Godbrand, she says. Never again. Later, Godbrand grows thirstier and dreams of earlier times, brutally and gleefully slaying humans. He wakes and demands blood, but is supplied only with pig's blood, rather than the human blood he craves. Disappointed, he realizes that Carmilla is right. Something must be done. At the Belmont hold, Trevor finds an old, broken mirror. After berating him for not knowing what it is, Alucard and Sypha reveal it to be a distance mirror, which allows for remote viewing. Looking it over, Alucard deems that it can be repaired. You have the most fascinating family junkyard, Belmont, Alucard says. Belmont retorts with his own insult before Sypha pulls him aside to chide him, saying, You are an adult. You do not have to rise to his every barb. Grow up, Trevor, she says, then softens her tone, asking, Why is your name Trevor anyway? He explains he was named after Trevor, a horse ridden by Leon Belmont, his ancestor that brought the family to Wallachia. Sypha playfully moves closer to Trevor, announcing his new nickname is Treffy. The two of them laugh while Alucard stares at his broken reflection. At Dracula's castle, Carmilla again tries turning Hector against Dracula. He's clearly gone mad, having mistaken a human pet for a wife. Hector remains steadfast in defending Dracula, until she suggests that in Dracula's genocidal fury, Hector is likely to be killed. He again defends Dracula, saying he promised that it would be a cull, that humans would simply be reduced in numbers and controlled, not wiped out entirely. He is Dracula, Hector, Carmilla says, as she places her hand on his shoulder. Why would he tell the truth to a human? When she explicitly asks if Hector is prepared to abandon Dracula to win the war, he urgently pulls her into his forge. Such things should not be discussed out in the open. Ignoring the warning, Carmilla insists that the castle must land in Betrayal. Then Dracula's loyal forces will leave the castle to take the town. Meanwhile, her forces will take the castle and unseat Dracula. Then they'll return to the plan of controlling the human race rather than extinguishing it, allowing Hector to live. Hector warns that her forces may not be enough. She agrees and says that's why Hector must do something for her. 1 year earlier, Dracula visits Isaac in his home. At Dracula's request, Isaac recounts their first meeting. He was being hunted by magicians who wanted to kill him and sell his body parts for use in potions, spells, and aphrodisiacs. Dracula saved him, becoming the only person to ever lift a hand to protect Isaac. Seeing their friendship still intact, Dracula asks for Isaac's help, raising an army to fight a war. However, Isaac sees through the charade, and Dracula admits that he is not looking to fight a war. He is looking to exterminate the human race. I will be loyal to the end and beyond, Isaac says, agreeing to join Dracula. 1 year later, in the midst of the genocide, Dracula approaches Isaac and confides, "I feel like the tone of the war hall is turning against me." He also admits that Isaac is the only person he's told the truth to, because he believes Isaac is the only one who grasps the necessity of exterminating humanity. Dracula sees Hector as a boy in a man's body, someone easier to lie to. When Isaac asks Dracula how he can help, he admits that Isaac may be his only friend left. Meanwhile, Godbrand, sick of drinking pig's blood, leads a small group of generals to a nearby town where they brutally slay the humans there and finally satisfy their appetites. At the Belmont hold, Trevor invites a lonely Sypha to join him under his dusty old sheet. They discuss Alucard. She observes that Alucard's sadness is different from Trevor's. Alucard's is like a bottomless well, whereas Sypha can at least tease Trevor and get a reaction from him. And sometimes Trevor shows warmth, like sharing his blanket with her. As they talk, Sypha forgets her loneliness and, with her head on Belmont's shoulder, finally falls asleep. Returning from his hunt, Godbrand visits Isaac. Godbrand explains that Carmilla is starting to make a lot of sense, while Dracula's tactics are not. It's time for them to take control of the war away from him. So, without hesitation, Isaac kills Godbrand. Then, over the mangled body, Isaac thanks Godbrand for revealing how corruption of the world has made its way into Dracula's court. "Thank you for showing me the truth," Isaac says. Grasping one last shred of life, Godbrand reaches up before a stake in his heart bathes him in fire and burns him to ash. Later, outside the castle, Hector enjoys the warm sun, while Isaac espouses the virtues of the perpetually cold stone of the castle. They walk to find an isolated spot where they can speak freely. On the way, Hector compares vampires to animals, pure and unmalicious. He once saw them as wolves or bats, but now sees them more as cats, and when they find a spot behind some trees, Hector tells Isaac that the cats need herding. The two of them were ordered to draft Dracula's war plan, but between the infighting and Dracula's attitude, at that Isaac interrupts. "And what attitude is that?" "He doesn't care," Hector says. "He very much cares," Isaac retorts. "He wants all of the humans to die." Hector clarifies that his point is Dracula doesn't seem to care how. He and Isaac are failing Dracula by not asserting moral order to the war. Isaac asks what he wants, and finally Hector says he wants them to convince Dracula to move on Umbrella. Isaac is skeptical, and because the plan would please Carmilla, he distrusts it. But, he adds, it would stop her from making mischief, for the moment, and it would get the war room pointed in the same direction. With Isaac's agreement, the two head back to the castle, and Hector informs Carmilla of the good news. She congratulates Hector and tells him to be proud of the quick, orderly war he is allowing. Meanwhile, Isaac visits Dracula, informing him that Hector will soon come to request they move on Umbrella. Dracula asks why, and Isaac explains that Hector wants to quiet the disorder in Dracula's court. There is betrayal brewing, but Hector is a simpler creature than that and is still loyal. Isaac explains that Hector just doesn't like the arguing. Isaac doesn't see any specific plan for betrayal, but believes it's a growing possibility from the growing frustration among the troops. Ultimately, Isaac recommends moving on Umbrella, uniting the generals, and quieting the discord. Dracula agrees to the plan, then shares that he is tired and less interested in the details. In the past, the smallest details of death delighted him. But those times are long gone, Dracula says. Let us just conclude this thing. As though on cue, Hector and Carmilla arrive. They make their case for Umbrella. Isaac voices his support, and Dracula tiredly agrees. Umbrella, fine, Umbrella it is. I no longer have the strength for these petty decisions. Amuse yourselves. We will go to Umbrella ourselves, so long as they all die. That's all that matters. They all have to die. Hector and Carmilla leave, and she asks Hector if he knows why she had to be the one to take control. Because, Carmilla says, I am surrounded by children and animals and dying old men. There are perhaps 4 other women in this castle, and they all glare from the edges, either disempowered by posturing man-children, or too paralyzed by sheer fucking rage to do anything. And which am I? Hector asks angrily. Child or animal? Puppy, Carmilla says condescendingly. Somewhere between the two. He scoffs. I thought you wanted me to believe you respected me. I did, Carmilla says. Now you're implicated, so I don't need to. You're hip deep in this now, puppy, and the only way out is forward. At the Belmont hold, Sypha excitedly calls for Trevor and shares with him a discovery she made in one of the books, a partially written locking spell that would freeze Dracula's castle in one location so that it can be invaded. When Alucard points out the spell is incomplete, Sypha enthusiastically shares that she can finish it. However, their talk is interrupted as the entire hold shakes and demonic creatures can be heard above them. The monsters struggle to open the stone at the hold's entrance until one of them weakens it with a magic spear. Then another, larger monster pounds at it. They are still locked out, but making progress. Inside, Belmont hesitates on what to do next until Alucard shakes him from his reverie. Come on, Belmont. Time to choose. You're either the last son of a warrior dynasty or a lucky drunk. Which is it? Belmont quickly orders Alucard to get the distance mirror working, so he can provide details on their attackers. Sypha will keep working on the locking spell, and Belmont will fortify the point of entry. Alucard points out that gathering details of their attackers seems useless if they'll see them with their own eyes shortly. So Belmont asks for his advice. Alucard is surprised, so Trevor reminds him, You're still a bastard, but you're the bastard I chose to fight alongside back in Gresit. Do you have a problem with any of that? Alucard does not. He goes on to advise that, instead of using the mirror to spy on their attackers, they use it to find Dracula's castle, now. Belmont agrees and promises to hold off their attackers as long as possible. He readies himself to fight. The creatures break through the stone entrance, and Alucard gets the mirror working, finding Dracula's castle just before it disappears. It reappears in the middle of Betrayal, sending destructive shockwaves through the town. At the hold, Belmont struggles to fight the large, horned beast that finally broke the barrier. After a fierce battle, he mortally wounds it and prepares to fight his next foe. In Betrayal, Dracula's army marches across the river over bridges. Nearby, Carmilla and Hector bring the bishop, now a reanimated corpse, to the river's edge. Following her orders, the bishop marches into the river and blesses it. Now standing in a river of holy water, lethal to demonic entities, the bishop dies. Then Carmilla begins the next stage of her betrayal. Her forces collapse the bridges, sending large numbers of Dracula's forces into the holy water, killing many. Her forces lay their own bridges and prepare to attack the castle, while she insists Hector come with her, away from the castle. He hesitates, but she reminds him that he betrayed Dracula. Hector has no one but her now. At the hold, Belmont struggles to protect Alucard and Sypha while they work. When he finally kills a particularly difficult foe with its own spear, Belmont growls at the dying monster.
When you get back to whatever steaming underworld shithole you came from, you tell them there are still Belmonts up here.
Meanwhile, Sypha prepares her spell and joins Alucard at the mirror. Using her magic, in conjunction with the mirror, she attempts to pull the castle to them. In Betrayal, Carmilla's forces batter down the doors and enter the castle. They commence battle with some of Dracula's troops, joined by Isaac. He runs to Dracula's study to inform him that there is an act of betrayal. They're being attacked by vampires. Based on Isaac's description of their uniforms, Dracula identifies them as Carmilla's followers. Sypha's attempts fail as the castle appears to fight off her attempts to move it. Alucard tells her of the castle's engine. That's what's acting against her. The point nearly becomes moot as a demon leaps at her and Alucard, but at the last moment, Belmont slays the creature with one strike of the Morning Star. Now aware of the castle's mechanism, Sypha begins to have an effect on it. In Betrayal, it seems to blink in and out of existence, moving from one point to another. For a moment, it lands in the river, displacing much of the river's contents. As the holy water flows through the town and castle, many of Carmilla's forces are killed by it. Finally, Sypha manages to steal the castle from Betrayal, while Hector and Camilla watch it blink away one last time. Ha! I did it! Sypha celebrates as the castle lands. Then Alucard turns to her and asks, "Where did you land the castle, Sypha?"
Right on top of us.
She claps. Her face drops as she realizes the hold will likely collapse under the castle's weight. She runs, and before Alucard follows, he takes one last look at the castle in the mirror and prepares to reunite with his father. With the staircase destroyed, Sypha materializes a column of ice underneath them, raising her, Alucard, and Belmont to the surface, where they are illuminated by a red moon. They see the castle, and Sypha admires her work bringing it there. "I'm pretty good, right?" she asks. "You're the best," Trevor responds. They head toward the castle. Inside, some remnants of Carmilla and Dracula's forces fight. However, the infighting comes to a stop when they spot Dracula's son, a magician and a hunter at the entrance. Following Belmont's commands, the three of them attack. Each uses their unique skills. Alucard transforms into a white wolf. Belmont expertly handles the Morningstar. Sypha launches spikes of ice, and with icy pillars, helps Trevor leap into the air. Their battle is swiftly won, but another wave of enemies approaches. Meanwhile, Isaac and Dracula cut their way through more of Carmilla's forces. Isaac spots Alucard and alerts Dracula that his son is in the castle. In Dracula's study, Isaac places himself in front of the vampire, vowing to give his mortal life to preserve Dracula's genius, knowledge, and will. Dracula praises Isaac as the best of his kind, and suggests he will hold value in the new world. Then he throws Isaac through the magic mirror, teleporting him to safety in a distant desert. Isaac shouts for Dracula as the portal closes behind him. Then he falls to his knees, distraught. In the castle, Dracula turns to see his son standing in the doorway.
Father.
Son.
Alucard pronounces that the war ends in the name of his mother. "It endures in the name of your mother," Dracula responds. "I grieve with you," Alucard says, "but I won't let you commit genocide. You couldn't stop me before." "I was alone before," Alucard retorts. Then Sypha and Belmont appear on either side of him. They attack, and Dracula quickly swats Alucard and Belmont aside. Sypha manages to endure a little longer, but quickly joins them on the floor. Sypha's pain calls Belmont to action, and he throws himself back into the battle. Dracula seems impervious to his punches, and swiftly moves to end the Belmont line. Before he can strike Trevor down, Sypha and Alucard are at his side again, and this time they attack together. Alucard with a sword through Dracula's arm, and Sypha with a roaring flame in his face. Dracula seems to take damage, but is able to knock the two of them away again. As Dracula turns, Belmont recovers and drives the remnants of a demon's spear into his side. Dracula attempts to strike back, but his attacks become desperate and undirected. The tide of the battle turns, and although the trio takes more hits, Belmont finally brings Dracula to his knees after a brutal strike from his whip. Shakily, Dracula stands and speaks. "The Morningstar whip. Well played, Belmont. But I am no ordinary vampire to be killed by your human magic. I am Vlad Dracula Tepish, and I have had enough." He launches a large fiery sphere. Sypha attempts to stop it with magic, but even before it reaches, the power of it begins to push her back, until Trevor stands behind her and Alucard in front. With Alucard's sword against the fiery globe, Sypha's magic, and Trevor's support, they launch the fireball back into Dracula. The resulting explosion launches Alucard and Dracula into another part of the castle, where the two launch into another round of brutal hand-to-hand combat. When Alucard grabs a piece of sharp wood, Dracula laughs and asks if he means to stake him. "You want me to," Alucard says. At Dracula's confusion, Alucard explains, "You didn't kill me before. You're not going to kill me now. You want this to end as much as I do." "Do I?" Dracula shouts as he strikes again at his son. Alucard dodges and continues.
You died when my mother died. You know you did. This entire catastrophe has been nothing but history's longest suicide note.
They fight again. Alucard quickly drives a stake into his father's torso, though he misses the heart. "Not quite close enough," Dracula says, before throwing Alucard off him and removing the stake. Their battle continues as Sypha and Belmont run through the corridors toward the sound of combat. Alucard and Dracula's fight takes them to a room bathed in red moonlight through large broken windows. Alucard attacks with supernatural speed until his father viciously grabs the boy's head, throwing his son to the ground. Over and over, he crushes Alucard's skull into the ground. He punches him through a wall. Reduced to animalistic growls, Dracula stalks toward his nearly immobilized son. Alucard weakly attempts another attack, but is swiftly discarded again, thrown into another room. Dracula walks toward Alucard until his blood-red eyes notice where they are. "It's your home," Dracula says. His outstretched nails close in a fist, and the vicious expression drops from his face, leaving only sadness. He looks at the decorations on his son's wall, the drawings on his desk, and Alucard's childhood bed. The red fades from Dracula's eyes, and the two of them look into the stars painted above them. Dracula hugs himself, and his lip trembles. "My boy. I'm killing my boy." He turns to a family portrait and continues. "Lisa, I'm killing our boy. We painted this room. We made these toys. It's our boy, Lisa."
Your greatest gift to me. And I'm killing him. I must already be dead.
As Dracula speaks to his dead wife, Alucard breaks a post from his bed, creating another makeshift stake. He approaches his father. Alucard looks him in the eyes, and Dracula does not stop him from sinking the sharp wood into his heart. Dracula begins turning to ash and stumbles toward his son, as Alucard's friends finally arrive. Belmont swings his sword, swiftly removing Dracula's rapidly deteriorating head. With a magically produced flame, Sypha finishes the job. With shrieking smoke flowing from the castle, Dracula finally dies. Alucard sadly realizes that he killed his own father. Trevor and Sypha quickly reassure him that he saved countless lives. "But it's all right to mourn the man, too," Sypha says.
He died a long time ago,
Alucard says. With Sypha's arm on Alucard's shoulder and her hand in Trevor's, they walk to the castle's exit, just in time to see the rising sun. With the crisis averted, they take some time to explore the now abandoned and damaged castle. For Alucard, it's a melancholy experience, stirring memories of childhood. Meanwhile, Trevor teases Sypha for melting the engine room, though she blames the engine for straining against her spell. Back at the exit, she asks Trevor what he thinks Alucard will do now. Alucard overhears and shares that his original plan was to return to sleep in Gresit. But now, he feels wrong abandoning all his father's work and knowledge. "I can't just leave it here," Alucard says. "It'd be nothing but a grave to be robbed, so let it be my grave." "No," Trevor says. At Alucard's confusion, Trevor explains the castle can no longer move, since Sypha broke it. "I do not break things," Sypha proclaims. But Alucard agrees with Trevor's assessment. Then Trevor continues. The castle is stuck right above the Belmont hold, the collected knowledge of Alucard's father up here, and below, the collected knowledge of his mother's people. Alucard is intrigued, and Trevor continues, bequeathing the Belmont hold to Alucard. "Make that and the castle your home, not your grave," he says. "Be its last defender, protect it, make something out of it, something better than a pile of ruins and a symbol of terror." Alucard nods in agreement. In a desert, Isaac is discovered by 5 men on horseback. The men quickly decide to drag Isaac to the next town and see if they can sell him. He, of course, does not abide and swiftly slaughters the men. At night, he resurrects the men into demonic creatures and the first soldiers in a new army of his own. The next morning, he leads his new followers to find more recruits. Walking through peaceful wilderness, Sypha tells Trevor she wants to rejoin her caravan and share her story for their memory stores. After that, she's not sure what she'll do. "You'll travel with them, surely," Trevor says. "Go back to your old life." She's unsure, though. She recounts some of the exciting times she's had ever since joining Trevor on his adventure. "Why would I want to stop now?" she asks. Trevor tells her to go on, and she points out that Dracula's hordes are still out there, and they've seen how corrupt the church is. "We're not finished yet, are we?" she asks Trevor with a smile. She does not want to stop, and, she points out, it's good for Trevor, too. "How on earth did you come to that decision?" Trevor asks. "When I met you, you reeked of piss, blood, and stale beer. You killed a monster largely by accident. Hey, that took serious skills. Trevor interrupts. And then it demanded alcohol, she continues, before storming off like a toddler with a thistle up his back end. And now, in the short time we have known each other, you have rediscovered yourself, and you've grown. Today might be the first time I feel like I was talking to an adult man. You're better than you were when I met you. Do you know why I think that is? When Trevor shrugs, she answers. It's because you're doing what you were born for. As insane as it sounds, this entire nightmare scenario has made you complete. I think you should see it through. With me. They talk more, and Trevor admits that this is the closest thing he's had to a life, and she's the closest thing he's had to a friend in a long time. She holds out her hand, and he takes it, agreeing to join her on whatever adventures await. She suggests they see her people, then head to Betrayal. But, she adds, let's stay here just a little longer. In Betrayal, Carmilla informs an already sullen Hector that Dracula is dead. Then, her people put a chained collar around Hector's neck. He struggles as Carmilla informs him of her plans. She'll head back to her land of Styria, recuperate, and then take over the Void in the vampire power structure. For that, she'll need Hector's skills as a forge master to give her a horde as Dracula had. At Hector's refusal, she laughs and slaps him to the ground, and with her face inches from his, informs Hector that he is her pet now. Then gleefully punches him again and again until his hands raise in submission. They head towards Styria on horseback while Hector is forced to walk, with his chain held by Carmilla. Elsewhere, before Sypha and Trevor head off, Alucard warns her not to let that idiot get her into too much trouble. Then they say their farewells. Trevor waves goodbye, Alucard gives him the finger, and Trevor laughs with a quiet "fuck you" before they leave. In the wagon, as they ride off, Sypha holds onto Trevor, and they look toward their future, together. Meanwhile, Alucard wanders through his castle alone, surrounded by ghostly visions of his past. At the thought of his mother, he weeps. Some time passes. A lonely Alucard catches fish and tends to his garden. He makes dinner and drinks from his father's wine collection. He talks to dolls fashioned in the form of Trevor and Sypha, and he mockingly mimics their voices so they talk back. After talking to himself for a bit, he concludes saying, "Oh my God, I am losing my mind. It's only been a month, I think." Meanwhile, Sypha and Trevor confidently lure nearby monsters on their way to the next town. They let the demonic creatures get close as Sypha plays a damsel in distress. "Oh no! Night creatures! Whatever shall I do? Out here alone in the forest, with only my brain-damaged servant who talks about nothing but beer." Trevor rolls his eyes as Sypha continues. When the monsters get close, Sypha sighs, "Poor beasties," before she and Trevor begin their attack. After taking out one of the beasts, Trevor is thrown against a tree, but ultimately they are victorious and mostly unscathed. Before continuing on the road, Trevor ties one of the demon carcasses to the wagon, so when they arrive at the next town, they'll look like useful friends, culling the area of hazards. In Styria, Carmilla arrives at her castle. Her first order of business is complaining to Lenore and Striga of the chaos she endured the last 30 days. They were forced to march most of the way, as their horses were killed by angry humans in the first week. She continues, listing the many annoyances they faced. Humans fighting each other, night creatures gone mad, even vampire packs trying to set up kingdoms. Then she hands Hector over and asks that they throw it in a cell and give it food once a day. Striga has him sent to the western cell block, then they head inside. Hector is stripped of his clothing, then thrown in his cell. He is also given his first meal, a piece of moldy, bug-ridden bread. Carmilla, Lenore, and Striga meet with Morana. Hearing how awful Carmilla's trip was, Morana offers a delicious glass of virgin blood. With her mood improved, the group welcomes Carmilla home again, and the 4 queens of Styria enjoy their reunion. In a small town, a man named Saint Germain haggles over the price of 2 apples when a wagon arrives. Wondering who it could be, he notices the night creature being dragged behind the wagon and comments, "Well, this is new." Trevor disembarks from the wagon and asks, "Had you been having problems with the night creature pack outside your lovely town?" A bald man, dressed in robes, confirms they were, and Trevor announces that he and his partner decided to take care of the problem for them. When Trevor asks where they are, the man tells them their town is called Lindenfeld. "The minister town," Sypha says. Then she jumps off the wagon and joins Trevor, asking, "The spire we saw from the road belongs to the priory, yes?" "Oh," the man says, "you're a speaker. We haven't seen any of your people in some while. It's a genuine honor." Then he bows and adds, I'm the judge of Lindenfeld. When they ask his name, he replies that he's simply the judge. Wait a moment, Trevor says intensely. He notices robed figures in green armbands arrive. Those are priests of the priory, the judge says. Take care. They are somewhat, broken. Sala, with wide, unblinking eyes, leads 2 other monks behind him and approaches the judge. He asks what is happening and gestures to Trevor, asking if he killed the night creature. Trevor confirms he did. Good, Sala says. The Horde betrayed Dracula at Brela. Murder at the hands of vagabonds, and a long dragging behind a wagon is no less than they deserve. I would very much like to know who killed him, Speaker, Sala says. Why? Sypha asks. So my men can punish those responsible, he says. Dracula sought to reunite us all in hell with his beloved wife. Okay then, Trevor says. Nice to meet you. Sala suspiciously comments that there was a speaker woman at Gresit. Sypha angrily replies that there are speakers everywhere, and they would have given aid and comfort to those harmed by Dracula's hordes. At the growing tension, the judge tells Sala, "It is time for you and yours to move along now, Prior." The 3 monks leave, and Trevor asks what the hell that was. We suffered an attack during the recent troubles, the judge replies. It was a difficult night for the Priory. Honestly, though, when it was learned that the actions of the church were what unleashed it all, I think it just sent Prior Sala and his people quite mad. He's been taking in refugees of a similar turn of mind. When he asks their names, Trevor finally introduces himself and Sypha, though he holds off on last names until they feel safer. The judge agrees this is sensible and shakes Trevor's hand, welcoming him to Lindenfeld. Then a merchant offers to buy the night creature's teeth at 3 coins each. Trevor accepts, and with the promise of money, he frantically searches and finds a man selling beer nearby. However, for killing the night creature, the bartender gives Trevor a free glass. After a few gulps, Trevor breathlessly comments that the beer is better than sex. Offended, Sypha uses her magic to make the beer undrinkable, then leaves, and an apologetic Trevor follows. At Carmela's castle, a guard grabs a bucket of ice-cold water and pours it on an unclothed Hector. In the city of Tunis, the citizens scream in terror as Isaac casually walks his small army of night creatures behind him. He leaves them outside as he enters a shop run by an older blind man, a man who recognizes Isaac as a forge master by the smell of hell which emanates from him. Isaac explains that he's visiting because he heard the man possesses a large Carpathian transmission mirror. However, the man reveals he sold that mirror years ago. Instead, he offers a distance mirror, which allows for remote viewing, but not teleportation. Testing its ability, Isaac uses it to see Hector and pinpoint his location at Carmela's castle. Seeing Hector's pitiful, naked form, Isaac exclaims, "Ha! There you are! Are you breathing, betrayer?" The blind man does not charge Isaac for the mirror. He recognizes Isaac as someone who received few gifts in life, and it pleases him to improve the balance. He also adds that when he eventually goes to hell, it might be good to have a forge master owe him a favor. They laugh. Outside, Isaac finds men with swords demanding he leave the city. He promises that he will, just as soon as he finds a ship. "No," they say, and insist he leave immediately. Isaac calmly explains that he was spoiled by a single act of kindness in the city, so he attempted to be reasonable. But of course, these men with swords only show him hate. He will not make that mistake again. "I don't need any of these bodies for forging," he tells his army. "You may eat." And so the creatures feast. At the port, a board ship captain awaits their next voyage. The captain is uninterested in where they're going, but at least they're going somewhere. He grins at the arrival of a strange man leading a horde of night creatures. "My friends and I need a ship to take us to Genoa," Isaac says. The man gestures to his ship, and Isaac suggests he may take it. "You could," the captain says. "You surely could. I see all your sharp-toothed little friends, and I've been afloat long enough to know what they are." Isaac asks why he's still talking to him then. The captain says it's because he's interested and likes to do business. Isaac says he thinks he'll kill the captain, kill his men, and take the ship. "You could. You surely could," the captain says. "But," he suggests, "who would sail the ship?" The captain casually offers that he and his crew will transport Isaac for some coin and the promise that his men won't be harmed. He's bored, and he knows that traveling with the Forge Master will be anything but boring. Impressed, or perhaps simply amused by the man, Isaac agrees to the arrangement. At Carmela's castle, she lays out a plan for her sisters. To their east, There is 800 miles of territory fractured by Dracula's meddling. They will take it and enclose it, turning it into a large pen for human livestock. It will take an army, but Hector, the Forge Master, can create one for them. However, Morena reminds her that Hector will have no interest in helping Carmilla do anything, especially after the way she's treated him. Striga adds that night creatures are loyal to their Forge Masters. They might just be giving Hector the chance to make his own army. Lenore interrupts with the promise that she'll handle it. Carmilla smiles and asks, "Is this going to be like the time you found a spider with one broken leg, and you tore the castle apart looking for something small enough to make a splint out of?" In Lindenfeld, Saint Germain excitedly approaches Trevor and quickly points out he recognized his Belmont crest. "Allow me to formally introduce myself," Saint Germain says as he bows. "I am the Count Saint Germain. Doubtless your family told you stories about me." Trevor explains. "My family were a little too dead to tell me many stories." "Oh, of course, the Purge," Germain says. "Great sympathies. Terrible crime." He explains that he knew Trevor's family and wonders what brought him to Lindenfeld. Belmont provides no answers. Then Saint Germain walks over to the priors and asks if they've given more thought to his request to enter the priory, repair their damaged books, and translate those written in foreign languages. Help they could certainly use since their last scribe was devoured. Saint Germain tries to sweeten the pot, promising he has knowledge of Dracula, and he'll likely find more as he translates the works that Prior Sala himself cannot read or repair. Finally, Sala grants Saint Germain limited access to the priory so that he can search for new knowledge of Dracula and Hell. Before Saint Germain leaves, he asks what interests them so much about Hell. "Dracula's wife is alive in Hell," Sala answers. "Dracula went from Betrayal to join her there." In the wilderness by Alucard's castle, Alucard senses two hunters. He quickly disarms them before they cause any harm. He pins one of them to the ground, a girl, and she quickly explains they were not hunting him. The man was going to cover her with his bow and arrow while she came out to talk to Alucard. The man runs over to join them, and they explain they've come a long way to find Alucard. They introduce themselves as Sumi and Taka. They hunt vampires. They were going after one in particular named Cho. They were slaves to her in Japan, and when she left to join Dracula, they were able to escape. If Cho was with Dracula in the castle, Alucard suggests, she likely died in Betrayal. Sumi and Taka point out there are other vampires in Japan. They need more knowledge to fight them and free their people. Sumi asks if Alucard will teach them. He warns that it will be difficult, but they are steadfast. He looks to the sky and thinks out loud that his mother would approve of him passing down the collective knowledge he possesses. Alucard agrees to train them. In Lindenfeld, Trevor and Sypha enjoy reflecting on their adventures so far. Though without monsters to slay or problems to solve for the moment, Sypha is growing bored, so they decide to leave town, and Trevor adds that Lindenfeld is starting to give him the creeps. Suddenly, they find the judge behind them, and he asks them to accompany him for tea. At his home, the judge demands to know who exactly they are. Finally, they introduce themselves with full names and reveal they are the ones who killed Dracula. He laughs until Sypha shows off her abilities, and the judge decides he believes them. Then the judge asks if they'll help figure out what's going on in the priory. He tells them that their town was hit by a pack of night creatures. They managed to defend themselves, but one strange creature leapt into the priory. Listening from outside, the judge did not hear the sounds of killing in the priory. Instead, he heard a strange language and saw a green glow emanate from inside. The monster was talking to the monks. Then lightning struck over and over, and finally the green light flickered and exploded outward, and suddenly the rain stopped. Later, monks came out with blackened pieces of the creature. They couldn't stop crying and just looked broken, unable to speak a word. After that, Sala refused to allow anyone to enter the priory. A few days later, a priest covered in blood arrived seeking the priory, and every few days, other strangers have similarly arrived seeking it. The judge wants to know why, and asks if, as a speaker magician and a Belmont, they'll investigate. Sypha gleefully stares at Trevor, waiting for him to break his resilience and return the stare. She knows that the moment he does, he'll give in to her and take the judge's quest. After a moment, Trevor does exactly that. Somewhere in the Mediterranean, Isaac and the captain sit down to chat. At the captain's urging, Isaac tells him his whole story, including the parts about Dracula. The captain asks Isaac if his time with Dracula was really just a drawn-out suicide. Perhaps it was, Isaac admits, but adds that he does find the human race worthless, and thinks a fresh start would be good. Isaac goes on to share the distance mirror, and explains how it showed him Hector. He also mentions the blind man who gifted it to him, in exchange for Isaac saving him from hell one day. The captain asks if the blind man laughed after he asked Isaac for the favor. Isaac confirms that he did. The captain points out that means he was joking about being saved from hell, and the mirror truly was a gift. He also asks if it's really possible to be saved from hell, and Isaac responds, "I'm a forge master. I can take demons from hell and install them in dead bodies on Earth." He explains that it is a skill inaccessible by vampires. It requires a human connection. The captain surmises that Isaac's next steps are to exact revenge on those who betrayed Dracula. And then what? The captain asks. Isaac is confused, and the captain asks again, what will he do after he's had his blood? Will he take on Dracula's cause and eradicate humanity? "I might," Isaac says. The captain offers that maybe instead of living out Dracula's story, Isaac should live in his own. When Isaac retorts that humanity is corrupt and should be exterminated, the captain counters that just yesterday, someone gave Isaac a gift and made a joke. If he ends the human race, he ends human cruelty, but also human kindness. Instead of killing, why not use his knowledge to teach people how to be kind? Why not lead, just like he leads his beasties? At Carmilla's castle, Lenore visits Hector and shows him kindness, telling the guard to leave before she kills him for treating Hector so poorly. Hector accuses Lenore of putting on a show so he'll think she's sympathetic. "Why would you think such a thing?" she scoffs. He flippantly tells her vampires like to play with their food. Not her, she insists, unlike Carmilla. She introduces herself as Lenore, the diplomat among the four sisters of the ruling council. Miranda is the organizer, Striga is the warrior, and Carmilla is the visionary. Lenore offers Hector some food and he refuses, saying he prefers the rotten, maggot-ridden food he's usually given. Then she loudly enjoys a blackberry and offers again. She waves it like a treat to a dog, and he crawls over to accept it. Hector thanks her, and they share a laugh when Lenore apologizes for the absence of maggots in it. When Hector struggles to stand, Lenore assures him she is not there to cause any further harm. "Let's just have something to eat and talk." When she reaches into the cage with a piece of roasted chicken, he thanks her, before yanking her arm, slamming her head into the bars. He painfully bends her arm, forcing her back toward him. He expertly squeezes her throat with 2 fingers and growls, "I know I can't kill you, but you call the guard and tell him to unlock this fucking door, or I will rip your fucking throat out and break your fucking neck, and we'll just see how fucking well you live." Lenore explodes into a cloud of bats, easily escaping his grasp. Retaking vampire form, she kicks Hector, causing his head to brutally slam into the metal bars around him, then throws him against the wall. She kicks his head once again, holds him by the throat, then discards him like a piece of meat. Before leaving the bloody Hector behind, she tells him that she's a diplomat. She makes peace. Because of that, people think she's soft. "You won't make that mistake again, will you?" she asks. At Alucard's castle, Sumi tells more of her and Taka's story. They lived, trapped in Cho's fortress. They were given to her as children, and every day witnessed her cruelty, taking pleasure finding new ways to kill or torture. They spent years watching her, learning. When she left for Dracula's war court, they killed all her guards and freed their people, but knew Cho would return someday. So they hunted her, but instead they found Alucard. And now that she is dead, they know other vampires will eventually take her court over, so they need Alucard's help to know how to fight them. At Carmilla's castle, Striga complains to Miranda of Carmilla's over-the-top scheming, but Miranda leans her head on Striga's shoulder and reminds her that it's thanks to Carmilla they got to fall in love in a fairy tale castle. Not one to be outwardly warm, Striga reluctantly agrees, but complains again of Carmilla's foolhardy plan to take 800 miles of territory. When Miranda asks if it is militarily possible, Striga hesitates but concludes that, in theory, it is possible. Then Miranda explains that if they're successful, they would not be just a region or country, but an empire. Striga laughs excitedly at the prospect of leading an imperial army, and laughs again at how Carmilla infects them with her big dreams. Then the two hug each other and look out at the moonlit sky, celebrating the four sisters that will rule an empire. In Lindenfeld, Saint Germain walks past staring monks and into the priory, trying to act inconspicuous. Inside, he sees the remnants of a church, with crooked pews and an upside-down cross at the front. The place stinks with rot, blood, and buckets full of something. The men inside appear to be anything but sane. "Quite lovely," Saint Germain says between coughs. Sala brings him to a pile of books, saying he can start his work there. But first, Saint Germain asks about the symbol on their walls and armbands. "Those of us who bore witness to the visitor wear it," Sala says, "because he gave it to us." Saint Germain asks if Sala knows what it means. Sala says it is the visitor's mark. "No, Sala," Saint Germain says. "It's the alchemical sign for sulfur, used by philosophers to denote hell." Sala finds this to be magnificent, and is finally impressed with Saint Germain. He excitedly asks him to begin work and find them more treacherous knowledge. Before leaving, Sala makes Saint Germain promise not to explore anywhere beyond this hall. Outside, Sypha and Trevor try to ask one of the monks some questions. They are quickly surrounded and told to leave. Before they do, they notice the symbol on their armbands and hear mention of the visitor. As they leave, Sypha quietly tells Trevor to ready his whip, then turns to ask the monks one more question. "Speakers tend to be natural prey in towns because we don't carry weapons, so we all learn how to spot when someone's concealing a knife. Don't you think priests wearing a magic sign for hell and hiding blades in their robes is a little obvious, even for a small town?" A priest readies his knife, and Trevor brandishes his whip. Neither attack. Trevor and Sypha leave. At Carmilla's castle, Lenore visits Hector again. He asks her to drop the nice act. He's only alive because Carmilla wants a forge master. Lenore gives him an apple and asks a question. What does he want? He asks for shoes. Then she asks another question. What was Dracula going to give him in exchange for building an army? Hector is unsure how to answer. He assumed Dracula would allow him to live outside the human enclosures, though, as Lenore points out, there were not going to be any enclosures, as Dracula lied to Hector. His plan was not to control humanity, but eradicate it. In fact, Carmilla's plan is much closer to the one that Dracula promised to Hector. Lenore asks if Hector even wanted a reward for his work, or was he just hoping Dracula would present him with one? She again asks what Hector wants. He is again hesitant until she lays it out. They are presenting the same plan Dracula did, only they are not lying, and they do not expect Hector to work for free. When Hector doubts her intent, she reminds him that this is commerce. No faith is needed. She will give him something, and in return, he'll provide his skills as a forge master. For now, Lenore tells Hector she'll bring him some shoes in exchange for hearing him talk some more. She likes hearing his voice. "You're interesting," she says flirtatiously. "I mean, look at you, beaten down a dozen different ways, and you don't give up on yourself. It's nice." Then she leaves. In Genoa, Isaac disembarks from the captain's ship. He is immediately met with hostile men. Isaac attempts diplomacy, but is met only with fear and demands that he leave. Frustrated, Isaac asks himself why he keeps allowing this to happen. Then, his night creatures slaughter the men and give him fresh material to welcome more creatures into his army. In the wilderness just outside Lindenfeld, Trevor bumps into the judge by a stream. He tells Trevor this is his place of peace where he sometimes comes to think. Over a drink, they both talk about their past. On the walk back, the judge notices a symbol etched on the town's gate. It wasn't there yesterday. Trevor asks if he is sure, and the judge makes it clear that it's his town, and his job to pay attention to it. "I have to say," Trevor comments, "running a town does not sound like it's fun."
"It has its little pleasures,"
the judge responds as he leaves. Inside the priory, Saint Germain makes his way through some of the books. When he notices the monks leave and he is left alone, Saint Germain wastes no time before snooping. He extracts a small jewel from his bag and holds it up until it shines with bright colors. "It's here," he says. "It's really here." He walks through the priory and the jewel seems to guide him to a stairway leading to the basement. He places a foot on the first step when Sala appears in front of him. "You were told to stay, Saint Germain," the priest says. Saint Germain apologizes and explains he was just looking for a discreet place to urinate. Sala tells him to go outside like everyone else. He leaves and runs into Sypha, who points out that she's seen only the monks enter or leave the priory, except for Saint Germain. She's also noticed that he's a magician. Saint Germain quickly turns away from her, saying he prefers not to discuss it. He does not want the people in town knowing what he's really capable of. With a smile, Sypha says, "What you're saying is, you'd like to keep it that way." Detecting her mildly threatening tone, Saint Germain apologizes and comes clean about his true intentions. "There is a thing I am in search of inside the priory. It is occult in nature. It is quite safe if operated wisely. Yes, I am quite sure something else is going on in there. It stinks of night creature. But my only interest is in that one thing. So I would respectfully ask that you go forth and..." Sypha stops him and asks him to move aside as she spots a strange symbol etched into the wall behind him. She observes that it's the alchemical sign for Saturn. "And lead," Saint Germain says, denoting transformation and redemption. Sypha adds, "And the scythe, time and the harvest." She asks how the monks got the other sign on their armbands. Saint Germain tells her that the monks claim their visitor handed it to them. Trevor appears and notices the symbol as the same one he saw earlier with the judge. When Saint Germain continues to play coy about exactly what he's searching for, Trevor insists he join them for a drink at the tavern. At Alucard's castle, he begins training Sumi and Taka in combat with a sword. Sumi complains she can't get close due to his long sword, and he warns, "You should never get close to a vampire." Eventually, the fighting devolves into playful attacks, ending with the three of them in a pile on the grass, laughing. Then, with Alucard carrying Sumi on his back, they head inside for lunch. As they walk, Sumi turns and gives Taka a knowing look. At the tavern in Lindenfeld, Saint Germain finally tells his story. He dramatically asks if either of them have ever heard of the Infinite Corridor. "Yes," Trevor and Sypha answer in unison. Sypha heard it leads to hell. She also heard it leads to other worlds. Trevor heard that it leads to many different hells. Their understanding of it differs slightly, but Saint Germain explains that it is a route to many other worlds, one of which may be hell, but generally it is a system of doors to other lands, separated from their own by space and time. A long time ago, Saint Germain lost someone very dear to him in the Infinite Corridor, and he has been looking for a way back ever since. Portals to it are rare, and they drift in and out of existence. He produces the shining jewel from his bag and explains that it detects a portal under the priory. Sypha asks who he lost, and Saint Germain grows frustrated, telling them that all he asks is they stay out of his way. However, Sypha and Trevor suggest that it's probably no accident night creatures came to the exact location of the portal. In fact, they probably never left, and whatever they're up to likely involves the portal. "Well," Saint Germain says, hoping to wave away their concerns. Then he realizes they are right and adds, "Shit." At Carmilla's castle, Hector wears the clothes and boots gifted to him by Lenore. Then she offers to take him on a walk, under the condition he wears a leash, something Striga insisted on. Although freezing, Hector tries to enjoy the fresh air finally free from his cell. At the balcony, Lenore tries to convince Hector that they're on his side. He insists Carmilla made him betray Dracula. Lenore disagrees. Carmilla helped Hector see that Dracula was insane. She helped him make the right choice. "Nobody here wants to harm you," she says. "We just don't quite trust you yet," pointing out that he did try to hurt her. At a distance, Striga eavesdrops on the conversation and raises an issue to Carmilla. Hector turns dead bodies into night creatures. Where will they get enough fresh dead bodies for the army they need? Carmilla suggests they'll deal with that after Lenore solves the Hector problem. Back inside the castle, Lenore drops Hector off in a new cell, a larger one with a desk, candle, and books. The guard locks the door, and Lenore gently pulls Hector toward her so she can unleash him. This brings her face inches from his, so that if either leaned forward only slightly, their lips would meet. Her hand brushes the sides of his neck to unsnap the collar. Then she leans back and asks if she can see him tomorrow night. Yes, he answers quickly. Yes, of course. In Lindenfeld, Trevor and Sypha lie in bed together and discuss their thoughts on Saint Germain. Trevor does not trust him, but he's not what he thought on first impression. He's sad, Sypha suggests. They both observe that Saint Germain puts on a front, and Trevor is bothered by how quickly he dropped it for them. He suggests that maybe Saint Germain has been alone so long he dropped the front so quickly because he's that desperate for friends. Sypha looks Trevor in the eyes the way only Sypha can and suggests they help the man. Outside, a monk carves one of their symbols on the side of the building where they sleep. Elsewhere in town, Saint Germain screams as he dreams of falling through the portal. He comes to a stop and walks through the corridor shouting, "Where are you?" He finds himself in a desolate land where a large mechanical beast lumbers over him. He continues to search for the one he lost, revealing more strange worlds. He sees pyramids, a machine that flies before a fractured moon, a tribal man swinging something rapidly in circles. "Please, tell me where you are," Saint Germain begs. A world full of twisted staircases and bookshelves floats before him. He spots the silhouette of a young girl and reaches out his hand to her. She reaches back, but they are too far apart. Before the portal closes, the silhouette tosses him a jewel. Saint Germain wakes, panting heavily, then writes in a notebook. He speaks to himself, wondering if he ever had good dreams, and telling the one he lost that he no longer wants to sleep. Not until they are back. Not until he lives in the good dream again. Not until you're back, he says. In a desert outside Genoa, Isaac sits at a campfire under the watchful eye of night creatures. He asks for the one who can talk well, and a humanoid insect joins him by the fire. "Do you remember who you were?" Isaac asks, "before you went to hell?" "I almost do. It's like I remember how it was to dream, and to remember moments of the dream, but never the entire play," it responds. Isaac asks what he remembers, and the creature continues. "I was a scholar, in a place called Athens. I think it was a long time ago. I was a philosopher." Isaac is surprised. "And this was a thing that sent you to hell?" "I lived as a man during a time when the empire that ruled Athens changed its religion and laws. I believed philosophy to be the study of the systems of the world and our purposes in it. And yet discussion of the nature of the divine became a crime. Christians hunted him, and in a church before a judge, he lied. He gave up others so that he may live. I became a sinner, it says, and they killed me anyway. I woke up in hell because this world is insane, and I learned something about sin." "What did you learn?" Isaac asks. The fly leans forward. "I learned to like it. Yet here I am, back on the surface of the earth, strong and free, in a world where thinking is considered something that should be tortured and murdered. Thank you for my second life. I intend to use it well, and make wonderful new dreams of it." At Alucard's castle, Sumi asks if the engine room which moves it can ever be fixed. Alucard explains that it can, but it would take a long time, and there are more important things to do right now. He takes Sumi and Taka to the Belmont hold. They ask a lot of questions about potential weapons, so Alucard clarifies. "You do understand. I'm sharing all of this with you so that you'll remember it and pass it on, not just the war-making." At Lindenfeld, the judge chides a child for running. Then his tone softens, and he tells the child of a secret path he can take through the woods, where his parents say not to go. There, the child will find the judge's secret apple tree. If the child tells no one about it, he can have 3 apples. At that, the boy runs off excitedly in search of the tree. At the priory, Saint Germain returns to continue his work. In the stack of books, he finds one with a cover stitched together of a strange material and a handprint on one side. In it, he finds detailed drawings and descriptions of monsters, and he finds missing pages. Sala chalks up the missing pages to normal wear and tear. Saint Germain points out the tears haven't yellowed. The pages were removed recently. Pages which, Saint Germain explains, involve methods and processes for returning people from hell. Sala continues to brush it off, and Saint Germain continues, explaining the book was written by a forge master 200 years ago, an insane forge master who did not practice in the usual way. Sala asks if the book mentions Dracula. It does not, and therefore it does not interest him. Sala leaves. Elsewhere, outside Genoa, Isaac continues his march when he comes across a lone elderly woman in a rocking chair. "Good morning, Sir Forge Master," she greets him, recognizing his demonic scent. She warns that he'll find no fresh bodies to kill and forge here, as she is entirely alone. The once teeming village is now empty. Instead, she recommends Isaac head 13 miles north, where he'll find a prison-like town run by a magician. The magician had dreams of a city, so, she says, he swept up the surrounding villages, cooked their souls down to ash, turned them into ants, make them eat shit, and stack bricks. Isaac finds it odd that this woman somehow survived and allowed her neighbors to be taken. Unless, of course, he says, you're not quite what you pass yourself off as. A wind blows, and the woman glows with a purple hue. Then she sits, saying she's not as strong as she once was. "This life takes its toll, Forge Master," she says. "It does," Isaac replies, as he sits and introduces himself. "I'm Isaac." "Miranda," she answers, then explains that when the magician attacked, she was able to frighten off his forces, but did not have strong enough magic to protect any others. In reply, Isaac tells his story. She is shocked to learn he is on a long hike to Styria, then informs him the magician 30 miles north has a transmission mirror, one that is unusually tall and wide, and can transmit many people at once. She tells him he could kill everyone in the town, forge an army, then teleport with them through the mirror to Styria. She laughs and encourages Isaac to go forth and take his revenge on the human race. "It would please a tired old colleague in your art, and it would be justice," she says. Before Isaac leaves, she warns that there are worse things than vampires in Styria, and worse things than betrayal. In Lindenfeld, Sypha and Trevor spy on a couple of monks carving another of their symbols on a home. They decide to question the two monks, but Trevor suggests they only need one of them. With a smile, he asks that Sypha let him handle it. "I'm a simple man with simple pleasures," he says, strolling toward the monks. He enjoys the brawl, which ends with one monk stuffed into a barrel and the other dragged away by Belmont. At his home, the judge nervously wipes his hands, sweats profusely, and shuts the curtains around him. He is interrupted by Trevor and Sypha's arrival, and the unconscious monk they toss onto his floor. Trevor informs him they caught the monk carving a symbol into the side of a home, the same one they saw at the front gate. Trevor kicks the monk and demands he tell the judge what the symbol means. At his refusal, Sypha explains that the symbol has a set of meanings that, taken together, mean death and transformation. They're planning something magical in nature. At the priory, Saint Germain is left alone and again investigates the staircase. He heads to the basement where he finds glowing green fungus, leading to the monk's demonic visitor, with its arms outstretched, each nailed to a wooden plank. At Carmilla's castle, Striga, in the middle of the day, restlessly reworks their plans while Miranda tries coaxing her back to bed. Striga worries that they need to move quickly. What if the humans are regrouping and planning to retaliate? Miranda sets her mind at ease with the promise that human borders are defended by mercenaries, who can be turned to their side with the simple promise of higher pay. At Alucard's castle, Taka tells Sumi he believes Alucard is holding things back from them. They also believe Alucard is punishing himself for killing his father. He stays at the lonely castle because it is as close as he can get to death without actually killing himself. They agree they should do something for him, give him some kind of reward. In the basement of the priory at Lindenfeld, Saint Germain stares in terror at the monk's visitor, though he calms when it does not seem to react to his presence. Then he notices the symbol on the floor, takes a step back, and runs when the creature begins to roar and thrash. At the priory's exit, he runs into Sala. Saint Germain tries to leave and tells Sala he's learned so many wonderful things from the books. What have you learned? Sala asks sternly, blocking Saint Germain's path. So Saint Germain shares some of what he learned, and Sala is disappointed to find they are not the first who attempted to open a portal to hell at the Priory. In fact, Saint Germain points out, the building may be contaminated by those previous attempts. He recommends Sala flee to avoid the hellish contamination, then Saint Germain leaves. Nearby, at the judge's house, Trevor interrogates their captive monk for information. The monk reveals that the visitor spoke to them in their minds, shared a plan to bring hell to their abandoned Earth. The monks have been spreading to other towns, sharing the plan. Saint Germain bursts into the room and announces they've got a night creature under the Priory, near the Infinite Corridor. The monk's plan is still unclear, but it seems to involve working with a creature that has taught them some magic. The judge decides he'll gather his men discreetly and plan to attack the Priory at sundown, clearing a path for Trevor, Sypha, and Saint Germain to get to the night creature in the basement. The basement where, at the moment, Sala praises the creature. You have shown us the truth. We have listened. We have prepared. We have restrained you as you wished. We have given you time to meditate as you asked. God has abandoned the earth. Dracula must be brought back. It is what you want. It is what he who forged you would want. We do this in the name of our visitor and his forge master, Isaac. When the sun goes down, we shall do what needs to be done. At Alucard's castle, Alucard gives his 2 trainees a tour of the armory. Taka asks about the castle's engine again, and asks if Alucard is keeping something from them. When the vampire is taken aback, Sumi points out there are parts of the castle he avoids showing them, things he doesn't talk about. Alucard suggests they'll get to them eventually. We have plenty of time together, don't we? He asks. Yes, we do. Sumi agrees, and she and Taka each take one of Alucard's arms and walk with him. In his cell, Hector's reading is interrupted by a visit from Lenore. He notices a black and red ring on her finger. She explains that it represents night and blood, the thing which binds vampires together. Mirana, Striga, and Carmilla and she all wear them. At Lenore's insistence, he reluctantly admits vampires may be more than just monsters. In fact, the book he is reading is fascinating. It's filled with vampire philosophy. Then Lenore changes the subject. Diplomacy is hard when one side has all the power. She can do anything, while Hector is just a pretty man in a box. I'm pretty? Hector asks. It just doesn't seem fair, Lenore adds. She beckons him to sit next to her on his blanket. He does, and she grabs his hand. She kisses him and points out the one advantage he has in the negotiation. She likes him. Hector is confused. He thought his advantage is that they need his magic to raise an army. Lenore shrugs and points out that's no longer true. Carmilla is simply planning to buy an army of mercenaries. Hector is no longer needed. We could just leave, Hector, Lenore suggests, if you want to be with me. In Lindenfeld, Trevor, Sypha, and Saint Germain, along with the judge and his men, march toward the Priory. On the way, Sypha asks Saint Germain how one opens the Infinite Corridor. He explains that it requires an appalling act of will, combining ancient knowledge and sacrificing something of your soul. It is also near impossible to direct with any accuracy. Saint Germain can do it, but it took him a year to recover from the last time. And we're sure the monks don't know an entrance to the corridor is down there, she asks. Absolutely, he replies. It's invisible to the human eye. It's why I need the jewel. Sypha looks down and says, I think we've made a terrible mistake. Outside the Priory, they come to a stop and the judge shouts, Sala! Prior Sala! When you were a simple man of the church, I tolerated your hold on my people. When you became a mad hermit who shunned my people, I tolerated you still. No more. You will vacate the Priory. Throw your weapons out as you exit. When there is no reply, he continues, Sala, I know you have deconsecrated the Priory. God is no longer in that house. You enjoy no protection. Out! All of you! Now! Inside, the halls are empty of any monks. However, streaks of blood lead through the aisle of pews, down the stairs, and into the basement. There, buckets of blood are poured into the shape of their symbol, and Sala uses some of the blood to draw a pentagram on the creature's torso. "It is time," Sala announces. The sun sets in Lindenfeld. The symbols around the town fill with flame before the homes they decorate explode into pillars of fire, burning the families within them. The fiery pillars reach to the sky, then intertwine and lead back into the priory. The screams of human souls can be heard as they are carried by the flames. Trevor leads the judge's men toward the priory, where they are met by Sala's armed followers. In Carmilla's castle, Lenore pulls Hector into an embrace and kiss as they lie in his cell. Elsewhere, Isaac storms into a town of people with glowing green crowns, indicating their enslavement to the magician. Isaac's night creatures kill as quickly as they can, and one by one he forges them into more monsters for his army. In Alucard's castle, the vampire lies restlessly in bed, unable to sleep, until his door opens. Sumi and Taka enter his chambers, wearing only their nightgowns. They sit on his bed. "You've been so alone," Taka says. "It's time for your reward," Sumi adds. In Alucard's castle, Taka, Sumi, and Alucard disrobe. In Carmilla's castle, Lenore and Hector do the same. In Lindenfeld, flames roar as the judge's men and Sala's followers clash in bloody combat. In the basement, the pillars of flame meet in a swirl before screaming into the pentagram drawn on the night creature. Sala stares in terror as a portal opens and small creatures fly out of it, followed by a much larger one. In the magically enslaved town, the controlled humans gain some edge in their fight against Isaac's creatures. In the midst of battle, Isaac spots a conspicuous glowing tower in the distance, and quickly makes his way toward it on horseback, forging more creatures on the way. Around him, the humans with green crowns begin floating into the sky toward the tower. A massive sphere of human bodies forms above the town and begins launching clusters of people as fleshy cannonballs into Isaac's army. Isaac dodges most of the attacks, but as one body flies toward him, he draws his dagger and forges the weaponized human into a large night creature, one large enough to distract the floating sphere of living bodies. Isaac manages to reach the tower and runs into it. He makes his way up the spiral stairs, dodging attacks from more controlled people floating from the sphere into the tower's windows. In Lindenfeld, the small flying creatures leave the priory and attack the warring men outside it. During the distraction, Trevor and Sypha fight their way into the priory, bringing Saint Germain with them, protected by floating ice shields produced by Sypha. Inside, they find the large pitchfork-wielding beast from the portal. It manages to knock Sypha into the air, where she faces a second similar monster. It flies at her, but she quickly repurposes Saint Germain's shields as blades, and the creature is quickly dismembered. In the priory, Trevor faces the other creature, which is still in one piece, until Belmont's Morning Star takes its left leg. Moments later, Trevor angrily kills it in close range. Then he regroups with Sypha and Saint Germain. Elsewhere, Isaac reaches the top of the tower and runs toward an old magician. Isaac stops when a glowing green crown appears above his own head. But before its full control takes hold, Isaac removes it with his dagger and kills the wizard. Outside, the crowns disappear, as does the magic which suspended the villagers above ground. Bodies reign over the town. Isaac smiles. In a cell in Carmilla's castle, Lenore holds Hector as the two make love. "Tell me you're mine," she says, and he does. She quietly slips a ring on his finger and asks him to promise his loyalty. He does, and the ring glows, then painfully squeezes his finger. In Alucard's bed, Sumi and Taka pleasure the vampire as they quietly slip restraints on each of his wrists. Blood flows from Hector's hand. Magic restraints explode from the metal rings around Alucard's wrists, tightly binding his entire body. A red glow fires from the ring on Hector's finger, dispersing like snakes, ripping in and out of his body as though he were a man caught in barbed wire. He screams. Meanwhile, Alucard's restraints burn into his skin, and Sumi and Taka draw swords above him. In Lindenfeld, Sypha, Saint Germain, and Trevor finally reach the basement. They see the night creature with the shapes of human faces covering its body, as the souls carried by fire are trapped within it. The beast spits out a pillar of flame, and the screams can be heard as the fire launches into the portal. It grows brighter. Sala stares into the portal and asks,
What the fuck is that?
Through the portal, deep within the depths of hell, in the rubble of an old home, Vlad Dracula Tepish embraces his wife. In a tower no longer inhabited by a mad magician, Isaac heads to the basement and finds the wizard's transmission mirror. Outside, Isaac orders the night creatures to kill any remaining people, but cease the fires and destruction. He wants to leave the city standing. Under Lindenfeld, Trevor, Sypha, and Saint Germain stare through a portal into hell. Before Saint Germain can attempt to close it, the restrained night creature, the monk's visitor, frees itself and fires a pillar of flame through the prior's ceiling and into the sky. Demonic creatures begin marching out of the portal. Surrounded by hellspawn, Trevor asks, Sypha, do you have my back? Always, she answers. The demons strike with a combination of magical and physical attacks. Sypha and Trevor quickly respond in kind. As they fight, Saint Germain runs to the portal and begins the process of closing it. After dispatching several of the monsters, Trevor comes face to face with the one that opened the portal, the monk's visitor. He whips it with the Morning Star, throws a spear into one of its many eyes, and kicks it to drive the weapon further through the creature's skull. After an explosion from another strike of the Morning Star, the creature quickly heals its many wounds and continues stalking its prey. How is this thing still standing? Trevor asks. Because it's filled with the souls of the recently murdered, Saint Germain helpfully answers. Trevor will have to kill it several times over. He gets to work. Outside, the judge runs into a field decorated with the corpses of his and Sala's men. He looks to the sky filled with smoke from his burning village. Then he spots Sala running in his direction. Moments later, the monk drives a blade into the judge's belly. The judge grabs Sala and speaks painfully. You have bested me. Well done, but you may not win the war. My men are everywhere. It's over. Sala tells him he's already dead and to let him go. The judge holds tight and continues. Sala, take the back field into the woods. Go right at the fork and over the creek until you reach the apple tree. Stand in front of it. You will see your path to safety. Sala asks why he would tell him this. It turns out that you were the better judge of all things, he answers, smiling. Sala runs and the judge collapses before quietly laughing to himself. In the basement, Trevor expertly showers his enemy with strikes from both his old whip and the Morning Star. The explosions from his attack knock Trevor to the ground, while Saint Germain struggles and thus far fails to close the portal. Through it, he sees Dracula embracing his wife. Frustrated, Saint Germain realizes he cannot control the portal, but he realizes the damn night creature currently battling Trevor can. He bravely leaps onto the creature's back and forcibly places the jewel on one of its eyes. The creature thrashes, but Saint Germain holds on. Dracula and Lisa turn and stare, as though they can see through the portal. Vlad reaches an arm toward them, but Saint Germain quickly shouts for the creature to show him what he wants to see. Suddenly, the portal's view changes to the silhouette of the girl Saint Germain seeks in the world of twisted staircases and bookshelves. He quickly shouts for Belmont to kill the creature, and with a final, fiery strike from both whips, he does. Just after the creature throws Saint Germain into the portal. From the other side of the portal, he shouts, I'm closing the corridor! Get out now! Thank you both. I'll see you again. The portal closes as Sypha helps Trevor out of the room. In Alucard's castle, the vampire struggles against Sumi and Taka's restraints. They accuse him of lying to them and cheating them. They will kill him, get the castle to move, and build their own empire. We have been lied to and cheated across half the world, Sumi says. Do you expect us to believe you're different? I tried to be, Alucard responds pitifully. He pleads with them to understand the world is not against them. He is not against them. They raise their swords and pronounce Alucard dead before their throats are swiftly cut by Alucard's sword, moved by his magic. They clutch at their wounds, rapidly draining them of blood. They gasp, and they die. The restraints release, and Alucard sadly addresses his now dead friends. I never lied to you. Meanwhile, Trevor and Sypha run out of a collapsing priory and find the half-dead judge. "I've killed Sala," he whispers. He tells them to take the back field into the woods and go right at the fork in the path. They'll find him there. Then the judge asks for his knife, so when he meets Sala in hell, he can kill him again. Before dying, he asks for one last favor. He wants Sypha and Trevor to burn his house down. Not far from them, Sala runs to the back field into the woods. He goes right at the fork in the path. He finds an apple tree, and he falls through the trap in front of it, landing on a bed of spikes, which quickly kill him. In Alucard's bedroom, he weeps on the carpet, scorched by the death of his father, where his ring still remains. At the apple tree in Lindenfeld, in the judge's trap, Sypha and Trevor find Sala's corpse, and they find other, smaller skeletal remains. At the judge's house, rather than burn it down, Trevor decides to see what's inside, and find out what the judge wanted to die with him. They find a room full of children's shoes, and Trevor recalls the judge telling him that running the town has its little pleasures. Disgusted and disturbed, they leave the house, and Sypha burns it. Trevor grabs her shaking, clenched fist. She tells him she wants to leave now and never come back. In Carmilla's castle, Lenore brings Hector into a private meeting of the Four Queens. She shows them Hector's shaking hand and the slave ring she placed on it. She explains that when Hector forges a night creature, they are loyal to him, but now he is bound to her, so the night creatures will be loyal to her too. She hands Morana, Striga, and Carmilla their own rings, which will offer them the same benefit. If Hector ever tries to harm them or escape, the ring will cause him unimaginable pain. In return, they'll give him living quarters and freedom of the castle. He'll live as well as they do. Carmilla disagrees, but Lenore insists. He gets something from this, she says. He gets a comfortable life. He gets to feel safe. Terrified, Hector backs away from the table slowly. Lenore adds that he'll need a big bed as well. It turns out he's actually pretty good at sex, and she wants to train him. Disgusted, the three other vampires dismiss her, and she happily leaves with Hector in hand. In the hallway, Hector collapses to his knees. "My life is over," he says. She assures him his life is saved, and she gave him what he always really needed. She made him her pet. The mood is melancholy as Trevor and Sypha leave Lindenfeld. She wonders how things went so wrong. Trevor answers,
You've spent a couple of months living your life. Adventures and victories. Now, we're living my life.
Outside his castle, Alucard speaks to himself. "Well, I suppose I could have put up big signs all over the place. Do not enter, danger of death, abandon all hope, that sort of thing. But this seemed to work well enough for dear old Dad." Behind him, Sumi and Taka, now corpses on pikes in front of a vampire's castle, serve as a warning sign. Alucard enters his father's castle, and the door closes behind him. Thank you for watching this recap. If you enjoyed it, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. That way you'll be notified the next time we release a video, and there is more Castlevania content on the way which you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.